Hello, I'm Esther Githu-Yuwat. Welcome to Africa 54. Here's what's coming up. The United States commemorates the 23rd anniversary of the worst ever terror attack on American soil. U.S. Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove urges the Biden administration to ramp up its humanitarian aid to Sudan. She speaks exclusively to VOA's John Tanza. And an African Union report reveals drug and substance abuse is becoming a disaster in developing countries, and Kenya is among the most affected by the menace. All this and much more coming up on today's Africa 54. U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris joined President Joe Biden in commemorating the 23rd anniversary of the worst ever terror attack on American soil. In January, America's new president, whether it's Harris or former President Donald Trump, also at the ceremonies will continue to face a range of threats. VOA White House correspondent Anita Powell reports from Ground Zero in New York, from Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and from the Pentagon.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light?
It was here on a cruelly beautiful September day that the world changed. The worst terror attack in U.S. history started here in 2001 with two hijacked planes smashing into New York City's iconic landmark, the World Trade Center Twin Towers. Less than an hour later, another airliner pierced the symbol of American military might, the Pentagon. And then again, that same terrible day, a final hijacked flight came to a tragic end here, in this desolate field in rural Pennsylvania. 23 September 11ths later, President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris marked this somber day with silence, racing to all three sites, meeting privately with victims' families and first responders, and listening to the litany of names, hours worth of names, read one by victims' families.
Neely Ann Heffernan Casey.
Joining them in somber silence and quieting the usual clatter of this fevered presidential campaign, presidential challenger Donald Trump and his running mate, J.D. Vance. They also met with families and first responders. Biden and Harris issued written statements on the tragedy. Responding to a question from VOA, the White House said the U.S. continues to take terror threats seriously.
But as for counterterrorism capability, again, we have proven time and time again that we are able to monitor the threat and deal with the threat, sometimes in near real time if need be. Not taking it for granted, not saying we don't always have to keep sharpening it, but believe me, we're focused on it.
But terrorism experts point to a growing list of hotspots, from the revitalized terror haven of Afghanistan to growing threats in West Africa.
We've seen a rise of ISIS-affiliated groups in West Africa, as well as a rise in al-Qaeda-affiliated groups in West Africa. And we've seen some West African states have adopted authoritarian tones, have taken power by force, ignoring democracy and elections. And that has resulted in the departure of countries like the United States and France, who have embraced a rule of law system to counter bad actors.
Whoever wins the White House in November, he said, will also need to look at threats much closer to home.
I've been writing about the rise of domestic extremism for the last few years, and in many ways, it's the most profound challenge the United States faces for a few reasons. First, there has been an explosion of polarization in the United States, putting politics aside, but politics is part of that polarization that we see, that has resulted in a rise, especially in the early 2020s, of groups that have neo-Nazi sympathies.
We love you so much and we miss you so much.
A whole generation of Americans has grown up since that terrifying, clarifying, clear-skied autumn day. But for the next commander-in-chief, there is never a time to breathe easy. Anita Powell, VOA News, in New York, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the Pentagon.
Democratic U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris and Republican Donald Trump are each visiting swing states on Thursday as they try to woo voters in what appears to be a very tight race for the White House. Harris is holding rallies in Charlotte and Greensboro, North Carolina, while Trump tries to fire up supporters at a rally in Tucson, Arizona. VOA's Dora McCoy explores whether Tuesday's debate changed people's minds about which candidate to vote for.
Polls taken immediately after the presidential debate on Tuesday suggest Vice President Kamala Harris outperformed former President Donald Trump. But that isn't swaying either candidate's strongest supporters.
I know that under Trump, the economy was much better than it has been under Biden. I think his abortion issue comments was pretty strong.
Trump actually secured the border. Why should we have these criminals in our country invading and then basically polluting, harassing, and destroying our communities?
I thought she was on fire. She was succinct. She was sure of herself. She spoke policy. She was positive when he was negative.
I am so glad that she is touching on some of the tough issues on the economy, on abortion, on immigration. These are the things that we need to continue to see progress on.
Some Trump supporters felt that the moderators, journalists from ABC News, were unfair to their candidate.
It seemed like they're fact-checking him, but not fact-checking her. So what she's saying is a lot of lying going on. I'm very frustrated by it.
We already knew what this debate was going to look like. It's favored one candidate than the other.
I'm a little frustrated because I think she's had a lot of airspace on things that Democrats are going to be super excited about.
Meanwhile, fans on both sides felt the vice president successfully goaded the former president.
Trump, I think that he got baited a couple times with some of her personal jabs, like his rally sizes, people leaving his rally early. She brought that up, I thought, very strategically.
It's very clear that she's on her best game and that she's willing to take him on in a clear way.
Jobs bounced back, and it bounced back, and it went to the...
Early signs suggest that neither candidate performed strongly enough to win over significant numbers of undecided voters, the very people who could decide the election.
I don't know how much it's going to move the needle for anybody that still hasn't made a decision yet. I thought they both had good moments, both had bad moments.
I feel like they're both not the right candidate for me, based on this debate and the past debates. I'm still undecided.
There might not be another presidential debate to help him decide. While Harris's team is calling for another matchup, Trump says he is less inclined to debate Harris a second time. Dora McQuarrie, VOA News, Washington.
The U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, is expected to announce on Thursday America's support for creating 2 permanent UN Security Council seats for African states and 1 seat to be rotated among small island developing states. Meanwhile, the Security Council unanimously voted on Wednesday to extend sanctions against Sudan for another year. VOA's Paul Ndiho has our report.
The United Nations Security Council has extended the Sudanese sanctions regime, including measures such as asset freezes, travel bans, and an arms embargo until September 12, 2025. The decision was made by unanimously adopting a draft resolution, a technical rollover of measures previously renewed by Resolution 2676 in March 2023. Speaking after the vote, the U.S. Representative Robert A. Wood emphasized the importance of sanctions renewal.
Renewing the sanctions measures will restrict the movement of arms into Darfur and sanction individuals and entities contributing to or complicit in destabilizing activities in Sudan. All of this is critical to helping end the escalating conflict.
Sudan's permanent representative said there is evidence that the war in the country is a result of the support of the UAE for militias that are committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Darfur.
There is irrefutable evidence that this war that we are experiencing is as a result of the support of the UAE for militias that are committing war crimes and crimes against humanity in Darfur.
UAE's representative to the United Nations, Muhammad Abu Shaba, refuted the claim and said the accusations were baseless and utterly false.
I am compelled to participate in this meeting to respond to the baseless allegations made earlier this morning by the Sudanese representative who, as we all know, represents one of the warring parties, whose legitimacy to represent the people of Sudan is questionable, to say the least. His claims are utterly false and are a cynical attempt to deflect attention from the failings of the Sudanese armed forces.
Fighting erupted in Sudan in April 2023, pitting the National Army led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhani against the paramilitary rapid support forces of his former deputy, Muhammad Hamdan Dagalo. Aid groups say the fighting has prevented humanitarian supplies from reaching the 25 million Sudanese facing severe hunger. Upwards of half of the country's population faces acute food shortages. Paul Ndiho, VOA News, Washington.
Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove is leading the charge in urging the Biden administration to ramp up its humanitarian aid in Sudan. In an exclusive interview with VOA's John Tanza, she said the White House should consider creative solutions to circumvent obstacles to aid delivery to millions of vulnerable groups affected by the war in Sudan.
50 Democratic members of Congress signed on with me to ask this administration to do more. We want them to raise the awareness of this war, get Secretary Blinken out in front. We want to rally our international partners to also take this more seriously and pledge more dollars to help with the support around humanitarian aid delivery. Because if we are not taking the lead on this, then it will signal to the rest of the world that this is not important, and of course it is. And we must find different mechanisms of getting humanitarian aid to the Sudanese. Using the same traditional methods is obviously proving to be ineffective, and Sudan cannot stand to wait much longer for help.
Yeah, let's talk about the humanitarian front. There is a humanitarian agency. I mean, it's very, you're calling for an urgent humanitarian intervention. Why?
Because people are dying. In the next 4 months, it is estimated that 2.5 million people will die. Famine has erupted. Deaths are happening every day. And the warring parties are working together, in my opinion, to prevent the delivery of humanitarian aid. It is unconscionable and it is inhumane.
And talk to me about the international attention. Are you getting that?
No,
Why?
we're not getting. You know, I have my own suspicions that people just don't care or don't respect the continent of Africa. I think that is wildly ignorant. I wonder how many people even know where Sudan is.
You're talking about the American people.
I am talking about American people. And if we are signaling that it is not a priority to us, then it then sort of signals to the rest of the world not to take it seriously. And we know with forces like China and Russia working to compete against us and to dismantle democracies, we know that there are other agents and actors playing in this war as well. That is why it is incumbent upon us to take the lead and call for more aid and call for more discussions.
Talk to me about America's foreign policy and its resources. Where does it go? I mean, I know that the war in Ukraine and Gaza is shifting attention. But talk to me about the resources.
Well, I really applaud the Biden administration for saying no to isolationism. They finally got a special envoy to the Sudan, a year too late. But he needs to be supported with more resources and more staff. It is very important that Secretary Blinken show his face more on the continent and remind folks that this administration cares. I am certainly hoping that we can have a reauthorization of AGOA, but we also must continue to talk about the conflicts that are happening and the impact that they have on their regions and their neighbors.
That was U.S. Congresswoman Sydney Kamlager-Dove speaking to VOA's John Tanza. Drug and substance abuse is a disaster in many developing countries. Kenya is among the most affected countries in Africa, according to an African Union report. Various programs are being used to reduce the harm caused by drug usage, but more needs to be done to solve the situation. Colin Sadede reports from Mombasa.
According to Kenya's health ministry, the number of Kenyans injecting drugs is on the rise, and the majority of users inject heroin. Rehabilitation centers operating at the Kenyan coast indicate that mostly abused substances are heroin, cocaine, refinol tablets, alcohol, shisha, and khat. A national survey by the Authority for the Campaign Against Alcohol and Drug Abuse, NACADA, done in 2022, indicates that 1.7 million people in Kenya are polydrug users, with the coastal region having a prevalence of 10.5%.
One common factor among drug use behavior in this region is that most people have polydrug use behavior, in that one person does not use one particular type of drug, but instead needs or requires more than one drug to keep them moving. So you'll find a case where someone using mogoka, in this case, will use it alongside cigarette or tobacco in this case, and also some prescription drugs. Thereafter, this same individual, after chewing to counter the effects of the drug, they will then go ahead to use prescriptive drugs, or rather weed or alcohol, to try and counter the stimulating effect, to allow them to at least get some sleep.
Reach Out Center Trust, a non-profit making organization running various programs in drug rehabilitation at the Kenyan coast, identifies Mombasa's population as vulnerable to the drug menace because the city is a drug trafficking hub. Murath Swale, a recovering heroin addict, says he was infected with HIV by sharing a syringe to inject heroin. Now he is a peer educator on how to prevent HIV infection among drug users.
Honestly, I remember we were about 20 people that used to inject drugs. All of them have died. I'm the only remaining one. Some have died of HIV, hepatitis, overdose, mob justice. We have really suffered. There was stigma among ourselves and even the society. No one understood us.
Lately, the Kenyan government has intensified the fight against drug trafficking and abuse. Raids by the police and other anti-drugs agencies are frequently conducted where traffickers and peddlers are arrested. Unfortunately, many recovering addicts have taken up chewing khat, widely known as muguka. Muguka is a leafy shrub that is easily available and cheap. 100 grams sells for $50. Lately, local leaders have waged a war against khat selling.
We are strong in our resolve to ban the sale of muguka. We know it's being distributed and sold secretly despite the ban. There are so many allegations that we are destroying other people's businesses, but we remind them that business is affecting our society and we must find a solution.
A number of rehabilitation centers offer the medically assisted therapy using methadone and the needle and syringe program to reduce HIV infection among addicts. These centers also provide counseling and offer entrepreneurship and empowering courses that focus on female recovering addicts.
Honestly speaking, the MAT program has been of help to me and many other youths addicted to hard drugs in this community. Most of them are getting better and back to their families.
If I was to share my needle with other drug users, I would have been infected with HIV, hepatitis, or any other communicable diseases.
Despite the gains, Abdul Sabur at the Reach Out Center Trust says unfortunately there are very few rehabilitation centers enough to cover needs in Mombasa.
For people to be helped through rehabilitation, we need experts who are trained professionals in trying to assist this. This is also quite, the availability of such said professionals is not so common along this coastal region of Kenya, and that said makes it a bit difficult to try and bring on board personnel and human resource to try and help these people.
Collins Liberty Adede for VOA News.
Next week, we'll bring you a special report on drug abuse in South Africa. The leading public policy conference focused on issues impacting Africans, Americans, and the global Black community is underway here in Washington. The gathering aims to promote the political, economic, and social advancement of Black communities. For more insight, I'm joined live from the Washington Convention Center by VOA's Anthony Labruto. Anthony, what more can you tell us about this conference?
Hello, Esther. Yes, this is the 53rd annual Black Caucus Legislative Conference. It's their annual conference. This year's vision is Vision for Victory. But I'm going to bring in, I'm not going to talk anymore about it. I'm going to bring in the ultimate authority on the subject, the president and CEO of the Black Caucus Foundation, Nicole Austin Hillary. Thank you so much for joining me today.
You're welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Absolutely. So what are the biggest issues that you're hoping to engage Africans and the African American community on for the CBC conference?
Well, what I want everyone to understand is that the Congressional Black Caucus Foundation Foundation has a very simple mission, and that is to empower the global Black community. And we do that by listening to the communities and trying to address and provide information and educational materials around the issues that are most prescient to them. And the ones that we are seeing that everyone wants to talk about and engage around and strategize around this year are, one, our democracy. And that encompasses so many things. That encompasses voting rights, closing the Black wealth gap, education, infrastructure, our economy. And so those are the things we're going to focus on, not just to give information, but to ensure that individuals are gaining tools and are then able to go back into their communities and be leaders right where they sit. We know that those advocates, those leaders in their local jurisdictions are the ones who are truly making change every day. And we want to bring them all together so that we can collectively, as a community, prepare for how we want to move the country forward in terms of Black America and in terms of America writ large, because we know what affects Black America affects all of America.
And absolutely, and particularly on the global stage, how are you helping to engage African immigrants, potentially African members of the diaspora that are just coming in? How can the CBC and this legislative conference help them achieve, potentially more of politician or political role here in our country?
Sure. Now, the members who oversee all of the brain trusts and the sessions have their own legislative and policy agendas. Many of them are members who focus particularly on issues around immigration, migration, and those are opportunities for individuals who are particularly focused on those issues to take part in those sessions. They have opportunities to ask questions. They have opportunities sometimes to even have sidebars with those members. So what we do is provide a forum to position people to have those conversations and to get access to information. So that's how we are prioritizing those issues this year.
That's wonderful to hear. And I have to ask, what is your favorite part of the conference so far this year?
You know what? Someone asked me this question earlier, and my answer always remains the same. It is every time I meet someone who says to me, Nicole, this is my first time ever coming to ALC, because I know for every person it is a new experience. It can be life-changing. And what I want to see is for that to continue. I want to see people continuing to have new experiences and to have us bring new people into the fold to get all that is offered here at ALC.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
All right, Esther. So this conference will conclude on Sunday, but we have a lot of exciting things happening throughout the rest of the week. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Anthony. Great questions, great answers there. VOA's Antonella Bruto reporting live for us from the Convention Center, downtown Washington, D.C. Still to come, commemorating September as African Diaspora Heritage Month. We'll be right back.
Ever heard the saying, you are what you eat? It's a powerful reminder of how our food choices impact our health. Recently, the idea of food as medicine has been overshadowed by cheap and convenient processed options. On this episode of Our Voices, we're diving back into everyday foods and exploring how they can actually help heal and boost our health. So get ready to fall in love all over again with whole and natural foods. Join the conversation each week right here on Our Voices.
In other news, a passenger train in South Africa has been transformed into a mobile health facility to provide free medical care across the country for the sick, young and old who often struggle to receive the care they need at the crowded local clinics. The train carries health workers on a journey that delivers primary health care to about 375,000 people a year. The inaugural Africa Day on Capitol Hill took place this week here in Washington to commemorate September as African Diaspora Heritage Month. VOA's Jackson Vunganyi was there and filed this report.
Organizers of Africa Diaspora Day on the Hill say that they hope that this first-of-its-kind event becomes an annual gathering with recognition from the U.S. Congress. The event attracted mostly members of the African diaspora in the Washington, D.C., Maryland, and Virginia regions, with hopes to connect and network with each other on issues regarding their growing community. Ugandan-born Deogracius Kawunde says that his community is calling on Congress to set aside an Africa Day in the U.S.
We are here today, a very historic day, the inaugural African Diaspora Day on the Hill. As American citizens, we are here to lobby our congressmen and women to focus on African issues, more specifically for us, we in the diaspora. We are trying to make sure that in September is Diaspora African Heritage Month in Virginia and Florida. We want to make that a national month recognizing the contribution of the African diaspora in the American civic and other sectors of life. So it's a very important day for us to start this over here and make sure the African issues, the African diaspora issues are taken care of every single session of Congress. And hopefully we can make this an annual event. Change the way.
Panelists discussed the importance of sharing knowledge among diaspora communities, reclaiming their cultural heritage, while fostering unity and collaboration among African descendants globally. Amina Laura Ahmad is an award-winning speaker, educator, and entertainer who traveled all the way from Oakland, California to attend the event.
I'm here representing the Black American and Jamaican community as born-again Africans. I'm very passionate about us as Black people around the world reconnecting to our roots so that we can come together and blossom the best fruits. So I really appreciate this convening today, bringing us together. And this is the first, but it won't be the last. So I want us to know that we are all one people, one aim, one destiny, one Africa. Ashe.
Kawunde says that with the U.S. elections approaching, he hopes that whichever candidate wins will have Africa as part of their agenda.
Now that the elections are coming for the USA in November, we as Africans, we have very specific interests. Nothing Democrat, nothing Republican. All we care about is Africa, and we are hoping that the candidates can actually let us know what they have on the agenda for Africa, specifically for Africa and for the African diaspora. We can't choose which party works better for us. Our interests are known. Economic development, we need trade, not aid, governance, democracy, and of course immigration has to be worked on as well. Those are issues that are important to us as the African diaspora. The other diasporas have got their share. They got their deals from Congress. We have nothing for Africans. For example, those who are getting the DACA or Dreamers kind of support for migration, we don't have that for Africans. Many of Africans come here documented, they lose that documentation, and then they are in limbo. We want to focus on the issues which affect Africans, especially the immigration issue, which is unique in our case. That's why we're here on the Capitol Hill.
And that's it from us today. We'll see you back tomorrow, right here on Africa 54. Have a good night.